even looking back and talking about it now, it's still like, what did I ever do to anybody except just try to get laughs? Just like, no, I just want to make you forget about your hardship for a little bit.
The title of this Google Doc is, Does Dane Cook Actually Suck? After years, he's back on tour again, so I figured it was time to revisit Dane. He's an interesting case. He is and will continue to be complicated. Is he as great as you remember? Is he as terrible as you remember? So let's hop back into a time machine and go to that terrible, terrible place, the early 2000s. Before we go there, we're going to make a quick pit stop in Massachusetts in the 70s. Who is this guy, right? Well, Dane Cook was born in 1972 in Cambridge, Mass. He's an older half-brother, you should remember, and he has 5 sisters. Wowza. He was a shy kid, he was a theater kid, and he's a teetotaler. Never had a drink or drug in his whole life. Interesting, I know. He started performing stand-up in the early 1990s. He loved the big personalities. Martin Short, Steve Martin, John Ritter. He liked the biggies. He toiled in clubs for a few years. He had a part in the short-lived Betty White sitcom Maybe This Time, which ran from 95 to 96. And boy, you should check it out. He also had a cameo in Mystery Men as the Waffler.
I am the Waffler. With my griddle of justice, I bash the enemy in the head.
I don't know if it's a cameo if you're not famous yet. He had a small role in Mystery Men.
Or I burn them like so. Oh, don't do that.
Which I loved. I doubt it holds up though. It wasn't until 2000 that he got his first big break in the form of a half-hour special. If you don't remember the jokes he told, you probably remember what he wore. His first album, Harmful as Followed, came out in 2003. I still like the album art. He did it himself, which is pretty rad. And that went platinum. The second album, Retaliation, in 2005, went double platinum. Went as high as number 4 in the charts, which is insane for a comedy album. Honestly, the last time a comedy album got into the Billboard Top 5 was Steve Martin with Wild and Crazy Guy way back in 1978. It's insane. Comedy albums don't make money. He was on tour, he was performing in the rounds, selling out arenas. He was even listed in Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people. He was the first real concert comic since the 80s. Tourgasm on HBO, Vicious Circle, he hosted SNL twice. In 2007, he won Best Comic at the Teen Choice Awards. Ooh. And that same year, he became the second comedian ever to sell out Madison Square Garden, after our boy Dice. We need to talk about Dice at some point, but not today. Today we're talking about Dane. So on stage, he was this big, big physical storyteller, really putting his body and his vocabulary to work. He merged this sort of like sexy, smarmy bad boy with this kid brain, man-child stuff. Cool frat boy meets total dork formula that often works. Boys wanted to be him and girls wanted to date him. It's pretty simple. He was also making big Hollywood movies like Employee of the Month, Good Luck Chuck, My Best Friend's Girl. And, you know, make no mistake, he's playing Dane Cook in all 3 of them.
Uh-oh, uh-oh, uh-oh.
I know you can all feel that there's a but coming.
I don't know what it's going to be. I don't know where it's going to come from. I said, but the pendulum swings both ways. I'm about to get my ass whipped. All these haters came out of nowhere. I put my name in Google, and when I went to hit search, Google was like, are you sure?
I don't know if you can call it a backlash necessarily, because lots of people weren't on board in the first place, but somehow hating Dane Cook became fun and cool. He joined the ranks of Nickelback, Bieber, Twilight, Lena Dunham, things that people enjoy hating because they hate it or they hate the culture associated with it. And if you were someone that still laughed at Dane Cook jokes, well, I guess that meant you're dumb and you have no taste. I'm not here to tell you Dane Cook is or isn't funny. I'm talking about how we treated Dane Cook. What were the surely highly intellectual and nuanced complaints that people had about the artistic prowess of this rock star comedian? Is it complicated? Yeah, shocker, it's complicated. But just for you, I've made a numbered list. Let's begin at the beginning, shall we? Number 1. This is a simple one, and I'm not even gonna hedge it with anything. He got too big too fast. He did. People didn't see him toiling in the clubs in the 90s because you never see people when they're toiling in the clubs, but normal people build, and it felt like Dane Cook went from nothing to being everywhere, and it was a lot. And already, he's a lot. He's easy to parody because his style is so distinct, and before you knew it, there was just mockery of him anywhere you turned.
I love all of you. Life is so amazing right now. Everything is great.
Hey, you know what I hate? When you eat an ice cream cone and it's all like cold and you're like,
He's 5! I wish I could be 5 again. I want it.
His essence was boiled down to a dude bro who moved too much, and someone who says summer months instead of summer, or dunce instead of dummy. It's easy to turn into a formula. Number two, the just an internet craze argument, my least favorite. One easy way to write off Dane Cook is that, like, he's just famous because of the internet argument. And I see critics do this all the time just to chalk it up to his online marketing success, and it's true. He was very successful, one of the first comedians to use the internet, MySpace, Instant Messenger, and he chatted with fans that way. I looked up Dane and Cliff Nesterok's book, The Comedians, which is something I usually do when I'm prepping a video. It's really the only book chronicling the history of stand-up. So because Dane broke so many records, he bled into the mainstream, which is a feat not easy for a comedian. I was expecting at least a few pages. Nope. Cliff took this just an internet craze route, and he wrote a paragraph or two, and then he moved on. He was the most popular comedian in America for a while, just as MySpace was one of the most popular websites. Burn. So Dane really did endear himself to his fan base because he was someone who would actually respond. He's sort of a grassroots comedian going viral before going viral was a thing. Forbes called him the first internet-made comedian, and he was. He's great at treating his fans like people, not just a mass. And if you're a teenager, that goes a long way. He's talking to them like people. Listen to the opening of Retaliation.
We are going to have a relationship tonight. I'm gonna go out with you, we're gonna date for a while, and then suddenly, without warning, I'm not even gonna call you guys anymore.
People loved having access to him, feeling like they know him. Other comedians looked down their nose at this and called it pandering, and now every comedian has a Twitter and a podcast and an Instagram. That's his move. Credit where credit is due, y'all. That's his move. This speaks to a central issue with Dane, and this is something that I can't necessarily defend, and that's that he's good at the stuff that doesn't take talent. He hustles. I just don't know where the line is between hustling and pandering sometimes. While researching this, I asked a comedy journalist friend of mine what he thought of Dane, and his response was mediocre and hardworking. Not mediocre but hardworking, mediocre and hardworking. Is there a more depressing combination of attributes? This is like Rudy or something. It's so sad. Number three is the ego. This is one of the biggest issues that people have with Dane. And yeah, it's tricky. Case in point. For me, this is the issue that I find the hardest to dispute with, though. It's a lot. He's a lot, always. But remember, Dane Cook didn't have the fame of a comedian. He had the fame of a rock star. When I was in middle school, my friend Kayla had a cutout picture of him pasted in her agenda. I had pictures of Christian Bale and Ewan McGregor, if you're wondering. Weird choices, I know, but yeah. But to many, he was a heartthrob. Can you imagine, like, a picture of Mulaney cut out and posted in, like, a middle schooler's locker? So funny. Tight shirts, though, those awful jeans, that hair, that bravado. He had swagger. Dane was cool. He was a big part of making comedy cool again. Maybe part of the reason that his peers hate him so much is because he feels more like the bullies than the nerds, and it's usually the nerds who become comedians. The other part of the ego is the self-indulgence, and he's definitely pretty self-indulgent. For example, he has the endurance record at the Laugh Factory that I just think of as the, like, obnoxious-o-meter. He went back and forth with Chappelle for this title, who he's neck and neck with also for the Most Indulgent Comedian Award. But right now it's Dane, and it's 7 hours and 34 minutes. Dane Cook, even if everyone loves you, no one wants 7 hours of anyone or anything. I don't even want 7 hours of, like, comedians I love. I wrote my whole thesis on Mark Twain, who I've never even seen perform, but I don't want 7 hours of it. He's always had a problem with editing, and that sort of brings me to the next item on this list. The joke theft stuff. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of you are waiting for this one. The most unforgivable crime in stand-up comedy is joke theft, and a big cloud over his success were the allegations of joke theft, primarily against Louis C.K. in the early 2000s. I'm not going to say he didn't steal his jokes. Listen to them yourself, side by side, make your own determinations, but years later, Louis had Dane on his show, and they actually talked it out. Frankly, I agree with Louis, and with Will Schroeder has a great video on this, that it's cryptomnesia. For those who don't know, cryptomnesia is when you hear something, forget it, and then 2 months later think you thought of it. It happens to us all the time, and it's bound to happen to comedians too.
I kind of think you did.
Dude, why would I steal 3 jokes from you when I have hours of material? Why?
I think you saw me do them. I know you saw me do them, and I think they just went in your brain. And I don't think you meant to do it. But I don't think you stopped yourself either.
He's not Dennis Leary, he's not Mencia, he's not an opportunist. He just got too big too fast and he got careless. Robin Williams, Amy Schumer, it's lame, it's lazy, but it's not malicious. Louis moved on. Let's move on. He's paid for it, he hasn't done it again. He even pillages his own stuff. Like, there's that hair joke that's in Harmful as Swallowed. It's also in Retaliation. This stuff just makes me tired, but others have said enough about it. I don't think this argument holds water. Number 5, I think, is the most nuanced thing on this list. So, second to the mediocre and hardworking comment, the roughest thing I've ever heard said about Dane Cook is Marin, and of course the meanest thing comes from Marin, but Marin referred to him as an empty vessel full of fuel. And that's what we're talking about here. The easiest thing to say about Dane, or really any comedian half as physical, is that they're style over substance. If you ask me, I don't think that's the worst crime ever. There are plenty of great comedians who are style over substance, and we love them. This isn't a good enough reason. If you can deliver well, you don't necessarily need to be a great writer. But the root of this argument is that Dane found a way of performing that sort of feels like cheating. He could sell so much through his word choice, his inflection, and his physicality that even if there's not really a joke there, or even that good of a story, the audience gets swept up. It's a magic trick. He's so much personality that it feels kind of like cheating. It's similar to Steve Martin or Andy Kaufman. He just found another way, and it baffled those who'd been doing it the normal way. You can't say he's not utilizing his whole arsenal, throwing whatever he has and just finding out what sticks. Dousing himself with water, ripping his shirt off, kicking the wall, writhing around. It's theater, y'all. Comedians have to stand still. Stand-up comedy is a bastard art form that learned just as much from vaudeville as it did from Mark Twain, and I think that's a shitty excuse. I'm not saying that Dane Cook's stuff didn't get old, because it did. I'm saying is that it's one note, but it's one note that f***ing worked, so come on. Even if you think Stephen Wright, for example, is a smarter, better comedian, he still can't follow Dane Cook. That's the thing about comedy, y'all. If people are laughing, it's funny to them. You can't argue that things are or aren't funny. You can argue effort, you can argue artistry, you can argue ingenuity, but you can't argue funny. It's beyond that. It's unintellectualizable. The gulf between Dane Cook's commercial and critical success is like the widest I've ever seen in stand-up.
I've never been on a Rolling Stone list of top 100 comedians.
No.
0. For me, it was like the acclaim that I always felt like I got when I think about my career is fans.
When he's asked his proudest moment, he never says Madison Square Garden, he never says topping the charts. He says SNL. And I read that as the time he felt accepted. So I told you earlier the story of Dane Cook, but I left out what was happening in his life. Do you want to know what was happening to Dane just as the public was starting to turn on him? Well, his private world was sort of collapsing. In 2006, his mother passed away. In 2007, his father passed away. And then he discovered that his brother, the one I told you to remember, was embezzling millions of dollars from him. In 2010, his brother was sentenced and went to prison for stealing $11 million from Dane. In a matter of years, he lost both his parents, his brother betrayed him, and straight up lost all that money. And what was happening on the internet? What was happening in the rest of the world? The world was taking a massive dump on him. Hate his comedy, but Lord, like, give the man a break. Have some humanity. Yeah, he's not the best writer in the room. He's no philosopher, but damn, he knows how to perform, how to own a room, how to find his people, relate to his base. He just served this audience that was being ignored. I like the huge pictures he paints. If you're used to boring stand-up, this is Technicolor. His broy base that loved him wouldn't have gotten anything from the alti comedy of the 90s. He made comedy loud and rambunctious and surface-level fun again. Are people who like him, are they like not allowed to have comedians just because they're not as nerdy as you are? When a comedian gets that big, it trickles down into the open mics all over the country, and personally, I prefer the wave of dude bros that followed Dane way more than all of those like dramatic misers who came up after Louis, who just got on stage and complained every night. Look, if you love Gary Goldman but hate Dane Cook, if you're that comedy nerd, you need to get off your high horse and re-listen to Retaliation, because Gary learned so much from Dane Cook. He's easy to hate, and maybe he reminds us of stuff we'd rather forget, or a time in our life we'd rather forget. Personally, I don't have that many kind memories of 2005, 2008, but that's exactly my middle school. I don't think he's timeless. I think he was timely. He found his thing and he changed the course of the art form, and you've got to respect that. So he's on tour right now. Is he doing things different? Is he still the same Dane Cook? Well, I'll let you know in September because he's coming to New York. Personally, I'd love to see like an honest, matured, stripped down, tambourine-esque style something from him. But as my friend Dan pointed out, a matured, honest version of Dane probably wouldn't be dating a 19-year-old. That's all. Thanks so much for watching. Gosh, comment down below if you love or hate him. Just don't be a jerk. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye!